officials at the World Economic Forum have stressed the need to keep economies open at a time when more and more trade barriers are going up. Businesses and political leaders gathered in the Swiss mountain town of Davos to find ways to steer policy as concerns grow over trade wars, political deadlocks, and slowing economic growth. But leaders most involved in these crises were absent. US President Donald Trump skipped the event to deal with a partial government shutdown, and leaders from France and the UK have also stayed away. Their absence put a spotlight on the backdrop of this year's gathering, a world in turmoil.
But even as the economy continues to move ahead, as I said, it is facing significantly higher risks, some of them actually related to policy. And these risks are increasingly intertwined.
The International Monetary Fund this week lowered its global economic forecast for the second time in 3 months. It expects growth in the coming year of 3.5%. One of the major risks is the ongoing trade dispute between Washington and Beijing. The resulting slowdown in China's economy and a possible no-deal Brexit are also concerns. Bank of England Governor Mark Carney said the central bank isn't predicting a disorderly Brexit, but it is preparing for one. But he says many businesses are failing to draw up similar plans.
Port infrastructure is not there, border infrastructure is not there, to the extent that it would need to be for jumping from an absolutely seamless trading environment to one with friction.
Rising uncertainty over Brexit isn't the only change from last year's event. In early 2018, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was regarded as a visionary reformer. This time, the Saudi delegates had to focus on repairing the diplomatic damage caused by the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi government agents in October. The head of French energy giant Total and Swiss President Uli Maurer, however, said it was time to move on and get back to business. Activists criticized participants for failing to speak out about the journalist's killing. They also blamed the Davos elite for the many political and economic crises around the world that are discussed every year at a Swiss ski resort. Kerryn Stapp, TRT World.
Well, let's get more on the week that was with TRT World's Ghida Fakhry, who joins us now from Davos in Switzerland. Hi, Ghida. So this year's summit is over for another year. Take us through the highlights of the 2019 gathering.
Well, Oscar, there was a few highlights, as you can imagine, perhaps not as many as we'd been accustomed to in previous years. The theme, the central official theme at least, was globalization. The way, essentially, the world is getting increasingly interconnected in the age of digitization, big data, technology, artificial intelligence. We heard a lot about that, but I believe the underlying theme, though, was all about China's rise as an economic superpower with the clear advantage it has created for itself within the technological sector. I went to an interesting dinner last night with George Soros, the Hungarian investor and philanthropist. The interesting thing was the scathing attack that he launched against the president of China, Xi Jinping. He called him the biggest opponent of open societies. He described China as a mortal threat because of what he called was its advantage, its technological advantage, saying it wanted to dominate the world. So China very much on the minds of many people here in Davos. Otherwise, I think the main themes that we heard were perhaps something to do with this growing clash, I think we could call it, between globalism and populism. We heard from Angela Merkel, who was here, who was very supportive, obviously, of the whole notion of multilateralism in the face of growing populism. But as you can imagine, both camps are very much represented here in Davos.
And it was just a few months ago that world leaders and world business leaders shunned the so-called Davos in the Desert Summit in Riyadh soon after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. But now we've seen the Saudi delegation really try their best to repair relations at this year's actual Davos Summit. Tell us more about what the Saudi delegation got up to.
Absolutely, and it seems like a far cry from the days when the world was putting quite a bit of considerable pressure on the Saudis, and as you say, the investors were shunning them as well. Where here in Davos, the Saudis, to a very large extent, with the considerable help of the organizers, the World Economic Forum, were quite successful, I think, I would say, in doing damage control. There was a session yesterday here at the World Economic Forum entitled Next Steps for Saudi Arabia, which focused entirely on business opportunities in the kingdom, with scarcely any mention of the Khashoggi killing. Now, I think it's a clear sign that the business community here, and certainly a lot of governments as well, want to simply move on and normalize relations with the Saudis. In fact, those were precisely the words of the Swiss president, Weli Maurer, when he opened the forum 3-4 days ago. He said it was time to move on. This issue was long laid to rest, and it was time to continue, in his words, the financial dialogue with the Saudis. At that session that I just mentioned, interestingly, you had, for example, the head of a French oil company, Total. You had the head of the American investment firm, Morgan Stanley, sharing the stage with the Saudi ministers of the economy and finance, obviously to the dismay of a lot of the human rights activists here, who felt that the World Economic Forum did not handle this issue very well, and in fact gave quite a platform to the Saudis, and essentially a free pass as well.
Interesting. Ghida Fakhry in Davos, thank you so much for your updates this week.